cheating on third wife. Had a lot of fun together, and they claimed that they were in love, these two people who were married to completely different partners. But they found each other somehow, and then they're convinced that they're mad for each other, and everything will just be wonderful and peachy, which is cool. Hemingway returned to Cuba after his, whole trip that he was on with his journalism trip and doing things, and his house had been ravaged by a hurricane, and everything he set out to repair everything because of this hurricane. One of his first tasks was to begin repairs on the house, and was also to organize a cockfighting ring, a fighting cock. I'm uncertain. In America, people are way more sympathetic towards animals, to put it kindly. We are very sympathetic towards animals. And something like cockfighting or bullfighting, it's very difficult for Americans to partake. Football is cool. It's humans, so it's fine. But like, I do genuinely feel bad for such animals. I don't think I would be able to handle the cockfighting, and I don't think I would be able to handle the the bullfighting. It's just too cruel, in my opinion. And Hemingway, people told him, they're like, hey, isn't this a little bit cruel that you are making animals fight to the death? His response was, what the hell else does a fighting cock do? He asked with impeccable logic. I don't know if they were called fighting cocks before humans made them be fighting cocks. So perhaps we can, just as we made it a thing, we can take it away again, maybe, come back to a sense of normalcy. Or everybody else in the world catching up to America's humaneness and love of animals and not making horrible sports occur. I don't think I could do it. I don't think I could actually watch those sports. I'm okay with, like, if you need to hunt to eat and you're feeding yourself and you're using every part of the animal, just like, the ancestors before us, that they used every part of the animal. That is the best way to honor an animal, is by using every part and knowing that their life was giving up for a good cause, and they are enriching people's lives and helping humans grow. But it's good to be respectful of the earth and everything that it is in it, including animals. So fighting to the death and bullfighting are things that I would cross off my list. Hunting, I 100%. Again, you got to feed yourself. We are being practical uses, and also being grateful for these animals, and not wasting resources. But during this whole thing, when Mary is having an affair with Hemingway, she finds out his true side. She finds out what kind of man he really is when he doesn't get his way, what kind of man he is when he's under the influence and partying with his friends. If truth be told, Mary had some serious reservations about becoming the fourth Mrs. Hemingway, having witnessed the least attractive aspect of his personality, the petulant rages, drunken boorishness, and all during the time they'd spent in Paris. During an argument following a drunken party, during which one of his 22 Infantry Regiment buddies had thrown up in their Ritz Hotel bathroom, Mary had the temerity to suggest that his heroes were nothing but drunks and slobs. Hemingway slapped her and was shown the door, but only after Mary had justifiably responded with taunts. "You coward! You poor, fat, feather-headed coward! You woman hater! Hitter!" Alrighty. I'm dissecting this. I see both of them are crazy. Both of them are a little bit off. And perhaps they rightly found each other eventually. Hemingway is just the person doing all the bad things, and Mary is just enabling him by putting up with his actions. Put it down below. I want your opinion. If you had an opportunity to see someone's true side to the extent that they're so drunk or they are so out of it that they are hitting you or being abusive, would you marry them? Would you? I know my smart people out here, because all of you are. I know you just said, that's not for me, I'm going to walk away. But I don't think we can, expect much from people who, well, met having affairs on their significant others. So we're not really starting off with the highest hopes over here. We're not starting off with like all the, best things in mind, all the best intentions in mind. This lady still married him after this. And one of the things that gets me, that we talked about, I'm in a weird place right now in my life. I ended up talking to this gentleman, and this topic just came up randomly, and he was curious. It's like, whoa, what do you do? You know how it goes. What do you do? Well, I'm living my dreams. But we got on the topic of Hemingway, because it's the next subject I was intending on covering on my podcast. And this man is like, I know all about Hemingway. He's a woman hater. He beat his wives. He's a horrible guy, and he's abusive. And I'm like, interesting. I didn't know that about Hemingway. From what I can understand, based on the material that I have read, I'm not claiming I know everything, but the bit I have read, with the many women that he did divorce, if he really was such a monster who constantly beat on his wives, that would have come out. Between the 3 women he divorced, that would have come out. I don't know why that didn't come out. How is it that it didn't, if anything? And the last part where Hemingway gets a bad rap it's with his 4th wife. And it's the end, towards the end, when the drinking is getting heavier. He's doing less work. He's having his friends throw up in their Ritz-Carlton hotel bathroom. All these things that are happening, it's eventually the years and years of drinking is finally catching up to him. And his behavior and the way that he acts when he's drunk. If you've come across a person who has difficulty with substances, they are a complete different person when they are drunk. It is as if it's 2 separate people. Truly. And for Mary, for her part, she's just like, okay. Sanguine. That is the word that is described. Sanguine. And because I'm a nerd, and because you know who I am, I'm going to tell you exactly what sanguine means, because you guys, I like to boast that I have a dictionary app on my phone. Okay? I'm not even lying to you. Like, I have a dictionary app on my phone. Sanguine. Sanguine. Marked by eager hopefulness, confidently optimistic. So throughout all of this, Mary remained hopeful and optimistic that Hemingway would, I don't know, not treat her badly, or she just, like I explained, when he's drunk, he's just not himself. He's a different person. But in the morning when he's sober and his mornings are dedicated to him writing and he's at his best, he's a lovable, good, kind man. And I can see there are good sides. No one person is fully evil. Dictators are, charismatic. They have a certain feel to them. To become a dictator, you have to have some skills, and charisma are one of those skills. So I don't truly believe that, all parts of Hemingway is horrible. Just the parts when, late at night, things got out of hand, and he loses himself in the drinking process, that he becomes a bit of a tyrant. A bit of a problem. But it's the horrible behavior? Yeah, 3 women left him and just didn't put up with it. She's the only woman that put up with it. And in this biography, reading about this and the way that they describe it, Hemingway is a horrible dude and he's treated these women badly. But no one says that Mary is equally insane for putting up with the bad treatment. I know it's a double edged sword, I know it's a double standard, and I get it, and there are different double standards in different circumstances, but this one, while we're on it, yeah, Hemingway's a bad dude, and we will hold him accountable for acting the way that he did in this specific situation, but we will also hold her accountable. She cheated on her husband with a different man and chose to marry the man after he slapped her, after he was abusive. So they're both mentally gone, just in different ways that complement each other in this sycophanty, just psycho way. Mary's attitude to Hemingway's mild life crisis was remarkably sanguine. Hopeful, optimistic, sanguine. A word which could be applied in general to her perseverance throughout their life together. According to James Mello, matters came to a head one evening at the finca when Mary was helping Gianfranco with a U.S. visa application. He was accompanying the Hemingways on a trip to Florida and the South before they traveled all to Italy, when Hemingway stormed to the room, picked up the typewriter she was using, and hurled it to the floor. Later, in the dining room full of still embarrassed guests, he pitched a glass of wine in her direction. It missed, but smashed against the wall behind her. Breaking the house rule which decrees his study an inviolable sanctuary in the mornings, Mary stormed in to let him know that whatever he did try to make her to leave, he was not going to succeed. Quote, "No matter what you say or do, short of killing me, which would be messy, I'm going to stay here and run your house and your finca until the day when you come here, sober, in the morning, and tell me truthfully and straight that you want me to leave." End quote. She recalled in her memoir how it was. He never did, although his behavior and treatment of her often strayed well into realms any divorce trial judge and jury would have deemed both reasonable and cruel. Both deemed unreasonable and cruel. So the question is, why do people get treated badly? Is it because everyone else out there is so evil, or is it simply that people accept what they think they deserve? And it appears that Mary accepted Hemingway because that's the type of man she believes she deserves. But also, there are upsides to Mary being with Hemingway. At this point, he's really beginning to be successful. He's about to hit it with The Old Man and the Sea, and that's going to put him in a different stratosphere. He's a celebrity still at this point, so the acclaim and the people around him and the luxuries he gets to, partake in, Mary also goes along for the ride. So maybe she's a little bit sick in the head, and also she enjoys being with him for the upsides that he does provide. And the negatives don't outweigh the positives, or she just weighed it out and she says, I'm willing to take those risks. Can that not also be true? That some women are simply okay with putting up with certain behaviors because the good outweigh the bad, or simply they've made a calculated risk and they decided the money is worth it, the luxury is worth it, or they genuinely doesn't bother them. And it appears from Mary she could put up with it. She could put up with his bad behavior and all these crazy things. Later on, Hemingway's mom passes away. And before she passes away, this lady has dementia, we are told. One of her daughters, Sunny, was taking care of her. And, Mrs. Hemingway, Hemingway's mother, Grace, she liked to just run away from her daughter in a catch me if you can kind of way. Like, ha 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 ha, chase me. And then sometimes she would just forget who her daughter was and just have a look of befuddlement. Hemingway's mom had some form of mental illness on the way out. Hemingway's father, on his way out, also had some paranoia going on and some weird ailments as well on his way out. Keep that in mind for later when we come and further discuss Hemingway. But for the funeral for his mother, he didn't attend. He did everything. He sent the money and he organized everything, make sure that her plot was paid for, but he didn't go to his mom's funeral. He didn't like his mom. To put it lightly, he didn't like his mother. So to him, he was just like, nah, I'm okay. Thank you. We talked a bit about Hemingway being a sportsman, liking these, very cool sports, going to Africa to do big game hunting, and all these people that he would meet, and the adventures that he would have. It is super duper cool. These pictures up here, this looks pretty cool. Like the guides, and then, the animals that he ends up, shooting. It all looks super duper interesting. It really does. More pictures for you. But during 1951, writer's block, Hemingway's, when you get writer's block, it's hard. It's hard. It's as if it's similar to the artists. We talked about Billy Joel. I know it's been a minute. But Billy Joel talked about every sophomore, once you put out your first album is a Bildungsroman. I know, that word is so much fun, Bildungsroman. It is an accumulation of stories, typically from your childhood or about a specific matter, that has been done over a long period of time. Billy Joel describes it and says, your first album is a Bildungsroman. You basically go about, and everything you're writing or inspiration that you've been building and taking from all of your life. And if finally you make it, finally you hit Piano Man, and it's a success. And then, your sophomore year, you only have, and then your sophomore slump, the next album that comes out, you have 1 year to find inspiration and write 10 great songs that are lyrics, by the way, with the road sucking and everyone hating you when you've reached success, or the audience not being the kindest sometimes. All those songs have already been done. So the inspiration and where you're going to get that from to produce it within a year, everybody's sophomore album kind of sucks because of that. Because you have to go out there and you have to get the inspiration. But also you have to remember the next songs that you are writing, in Billy Joel's case, just to give an example, it can't be too similar to the songs that you've written before, or else it'll just be a repeat and people will get annoyed at you. You need to keep fresh. You need something new. You gotta move on to the next thing. It's the same for writers. You gotta move on to the next thing. You gotta do what you gotta do. And Hemingway got writer's block. He had written For Whom the Bell Tolls and A Farewell to Arms, and they did pretty well. In that, he has other books that are not as famous as those main three: For Whom the Bell Tolls, A Farewell to Arms, and The Old Man and the Sea. But you begin to get it, that your sentences that you've written for the past 5 books is beginning to is looking too similar to what you're writing now. And the style that Hemingway wrote in, and the subject or the area that he preferred to write about, it's crazy. Interesting things of major figures, major society. Yeah, Hemingway's major person. Made major contributions to society in this realm. But writer's block hits, and he's working on Across the River, which is shifted into a sea trilogy. And he was getting nowhere at a slow pace, all things considered. He began to concentrate instead on developing the tale of the Cuban fisherman he'd heard from a fishing buddy years ago. This book would become The Old Man and the Sea. He showed early drafts of the book to a film producer, Leland Hayward, who, along with other individuals, expressed genuine movement and excitement by the story and the quality of its telling. It was as if Hemingway had dug deep and found the master storyteller in himself once more. This excitement was echoed at Scribner's when, in March 1952, Hemingway sent the uncorrected manuscript to Wallace Meyer, now his editor. Meyer shared Hemingway's confidence, which was expressed in the covering letter. Quote, "Publishing it now will get rid of the school of criticism that I am through as a writer, and claim that I can write about nothing except myself and my own experience." That the nail hit the nail on the head for me. Everybody gets criticism. Everybody does. We know. And in the case for Hemingway, the criticism that he was getting, again, one more time, publishing it now will get rid of the school of criticism that I am through as a writer and claims that I can write about nothing except myself and my own experiences. That criticism is valid. It 100% is valid. The snows of Kilimanjaro, Farewell to Arms, The Sun Also Rises, all of these were what Hemingway had observed in his own life, and many of these characters were portrayed on Hemingway and his own deep feelings of what he was experiencing with Pauline, his second wife, calling her this rich bitch, that rich bitch. Yes, that's valid. And The Old Man and the Sea truly did, you know, save him from those such criticism. Finally ceased people talking about how he can only write about himself. And I think that's right. I think it's valid, and sometimes criticism is useful and is beneficial, and I think in this instance it's correct. The critics are right on this one, Hemingway. I'm really gonna do a reading with The Old Man and the Sea because it's brilliant. It really is. It sold 5,300,000 copies in 2 days. It stayed in the American bestsellers list for 6 months. Later, Hemingway would sell the film rights for a further $150,000, which today is close to $2 million in modern times. Wow. 5,300,000. Wow, that's amazing. In 2 days. It's just really impressive. I'm going to do a bit of reading from The Old Man and the Sea. And this is my Kobo over here. I'm not big enough to be doing advertisements. This is not advertisement. This is just me being real with you. This is just me being real. And also me building goodwill. Because eventually Kobo's going to be like, hey. Wishful thinking. Just me wishful thinking over here. I'm going to start in the beginning. But it's because, I'm sorry, I'm going to start towards, the beginning, but not necessarily the very beginning of the book, because, the particular part I'm reading moved me, and, I gravitate towards it. That's the main part. But you guys, I'm thinking of doing just a reading of The Old Man and the Sea, and then putting it up at some point. I'm very, very busy right now, but at some point I want to slowly do that and get it up there. Let me know what you think, if that would be something you would enjoy. I'm going to do it anyways, but I just wanted to get your thought process out there. But The Old Man and the Sea. Let me give you a little snippet of what this man wrote and how he wrote. The old man drank his coffee slowly. It was all he would have all day, and he knew that he should take it. For a long time now, eating had bored him, and he never carried a lunch. He had a bottle of water in the bow of the skiff, and that was all he needed for the day. The boy was back now with the sardines and the 2 baits wrapped in a newspaper, and they went down the trail to the skiff, feeling the pebbled sand under their feet, and lifted the skiff and slid her into the water. "Good luck, old man." "Good luck," the old man said. He fitted the rope lashings of the oars onto the thole pins, leaning forward against the thrust of the blades into the water. He began to row out of the harbor in the dark. There were other boats from the other beaches going out to sea, and the old man heard the dip and push of their oars, even though he could not see them, now the moon was below the hills. Sometimes someone would speak in a boat, but most of the boats were silent except for the dip of the oars. They spread apart after they were out of the mouth of the harbor, and each one headed for the part of the ocean where he hoped to find fish. The old man knew he was going far out, and he left the smell of the land behind him and rowed out in the clean early morning smell of the ocean. He saw the phosphorescence of the Gulf weed in the water, as he rode over the part of the ocean that the fishermen called the Great Well because there was a sudden deep of 700 fathoms, where all sorts of fish congregated because of the swirl the current made against the steep walls of the floor of the ocean. Here, there were concentrations of shrimp and bait fish, and sometimes schools of squid in the deepest holes, and these rose close to the surface at night, where all the wandering fish fed on them. In the dark, the old man could see the morning coming, and as he rode, he heard the trembling sound as flying fish left the water, and the hissing that their stiff, set wings made as they soared away in the darkness. He was very fond of flying fish, as they were his principal friends on the ocean. He was sorry for the birds, especially the small, delicate, dark terns that they were always flying and looking, and almost never finding, and he thought, the birds have a harder life than we do, except for the robber birds, and the heavy, strong ones. Why did they make birds so delicate and fine as those sea swallows when the ocean can be so cruel? She is kind and beautiful, but she can be so cruel, and it's sometimes so suddenly, and such birds that fly, dipping and hunting, with their small, sad voices, are made too delicately for the sea. He always thought of the sea as la mer, which is what people call her in Spanish when they love her. Sometimes those who love her say bad things of her, but they are always said as though she were a woman. Some of the younger fishermen, those who used buoys as floats for their lines and had motorboats, bought when the shark livers had brought so much money, spoke of her as el mer, which is masculine. They spoke of her as a contestant or a place or even an enemy. But the old man always thought of her as feminine and as something that gave or withheld great favors. And if she did wild or wicked things, it was because she could not help them. The moon affects her as it does a woman, he thought. He was rowing steadily, and it was no effort for him, since he kept well within his speed and the surface of the ocean was flat, except for the occasional swirls of the current. He was letting the current do a third of the work, and as it started to be light, he saw he was already further out than he had hoped to be at this hour. Wow. The one that gets me for this is, the moon affects her as it does a woman, he thought. Yes, the moon is very important in the way that the ocean behaves. We talk about high tide and low tide, but without the moon, the ocean wouldn't have the pull and wouldn't be able to, move and change as it does. The moon impacts the ocean greatly. It's really, really weird. Just like women, sometimes we're just we can be prisoners of our hormones. I'm just speaking for myself, okay? Don't come for me, ladies. I'm just speaking for myself. But the ocean doesn't have control. The moon does. But it's so beautifully put. It's so beautifully done. It's just brilliant. I started reading it, and they say, if you're gonna read The Old Man and the Sea, you should just read it in one sitting. It's just a short story. You should really just take a day, sit down, and just read it. And if you're, beautiful words, beautiful words. You see why I really want to get on the words? But wow, it's just so well done. History, the way it repeats itself, and the many lessons we can learn from those who came before us. Indeed. Yes, so many lessons we can learn. But there are cute cats over here. Hemingway had cats, you guys. Hey, instead of the old cat lady, you have the old cat man. The old cat man who's a writer. It's rare that we get that one, huh? We have a writer who is a man who loves his cats. The cat situation, it's not the best one, so I'm not going to break your heart and tell you. Well, now I have to tell you because I already alluded and got you curious. Fine, I'll tell you if you really want to know. Hemingway's cats there were a decent amount of them at his location that he had in Florida at this time. When it was feeding time, these cats, you really saw the number when all of them are just pouring in to get fed. But when it's not feeding time, you really can't tell. You wouldn't have guessed that there were like 500 cats around the place. I'm exaggerating, but it was quite a decent number. The cats and the inbreeding, they just began to have babies, and you know how cats can multiply. And just like humans, I suppose too much inbreeding will produce birth defects, and these cats are beginning to have them. So, his third wife, Martha, when he was gone on vacation or gone on one of his safari trips, went along, neutered all the male cats, and just took care of everything. So then there wouldn't be any more kittens and any more deformed, little kittens being born. And Hemingway, of course, is like, "What have you done to my cats? It's horrible that you've neutered them, that you've done all this." But it's like, that's necessary. And weird thing, this cat looks like he's drinking. Yeah, the cat is drinking. There's a cat that had a habit of going and drinking milk with liquor. That Hemingway, sometimes he's drinking and probably left booze around or just put it on the floor for a minute. And cats will just start licking anything, like water or any liquid on the ground. If you put some bowl on the ground, or at least my cat, he'll just be like he's looking for things, and he's just smelling it, and he wants to try it. They'll eat anything if you let them. So this cat is drinking. Yeah. And this man had like 20 some cats and going up, climbing, and he's yelling at his wife that she neutered all the male cats. That's his gripe. One of the major sports, bullfighting. I can't with this sport. I had to show you just because he's really, really into it, and he would end up in Spain, and he writes about it. And he writes about the dance between life and death. And, what do we call these people? Anybody know? Please put it down below. I'm not certain what he is. I want to say Metador. If I have that right, I would like to say thank you to my brain for storing weird information. But I would like to say it's Metador. But, whew, that's a difficult job. But just like I was saying earlier, Americans, that's the one thing that has seeped into me. I can't. That's cruelty. That's cruelty. There's one difference between just hitting an animal and it going down and then doing this. It's too much. My heart can't take it. But this kind of sport that Hemingway was into. And I can understand, the macho-ness and him liking such crazy sports. I can understand he's into it. But, wow. I don't think I'll ever see that sport. Ever. No, thank you for me. So, what did everyone think of his book? We read that little snippet, and we see how good it is. It simply is. It's just brilliant. To Hemingway's chagrin, however, many critics chose to read a Christian symbolism into the fact that Santiago the fisherman endures an ordeal which lasts 3 agonizing days and nights before his rescue and salvation, and stumbles and falls as he carries the mast of his skiff up the hill to his cabin. Hemingway, who said he held no brief for symbols. This cracks me up. Hemingway is like, no, my book, there's no symbolism in this. Christians, there's no symbolism. It just is what it is. You don't need to read into it. It's not that big of a deal. The symbolism, 3 days and 3 nights, and the suffering, and Jesus carrying his cross. Same thing, they're like, Jesus carrying the cross and suffering is like, oh, Hemingway's making him suffer and carry his skiff. it's just like a symbolism and the 3 days and 3 nights of suffering. And he's like, no, it's just that's just what happened, okay? I just chose 3 days and 3 nights. But it also makes me think, how much do values and things seep into us even when we're not aware? Hemingway, although he didn't partake and he didn't go to church and he didn't do the right thing or marry one woman and try the Christian way and stay with one woman, at least if you're a Christian and you say you've gotten divorced once, I'm like, okay, all right, God forgives. If you're call yourself a Christian and you say you've gotten divorced 4 times, I will look at you and be like, clearly you don't know God. Clearly you don't. And if you have like 3 children and you're on your like 4th wife, please don't insult me by saying you follow God, because your actions dictate otherwise, like Hemingway. But his Christianity, he grew up with a dad who went to church and was a deacon and, lived in that lifestyle. And he grew up in an area of like a lot of churches, a lot of, doing the proper thing. So I wonder, perhaps his lessons that was, drilled into him as a kid is coming out into his writing subconsciously, or, or he just chose 3 days because it sounds good. Or maybe the Bible, same thing. It's 3 days because it sounds good. And we've kept 3 days because it just sounds good. It could just be that. But the little things that people pick up along the way and their background, sometimes you just don't escape it. It just is what it is. Interesting things, major figures, absolutely. But I wanted to show you this video of a dissection. It's just really funny clip about that very thing. People reading more into writers, work than they themselves set out for it to mean. Just like we talked about Hemingway meant. So let's take a look at it. Let's take a listen at this one.
Right, let's keep it simple, no hidden meanings, straight to the point. John ate spaghetti for lunch.
Now, this next passage is particularly brilliant. John ate spaghetti for lunch. Now, spaghetti symbolizes the pain and suffering.
Now, spaghetti symbolizes the pain and suffering. No, spaghetti is just spaghetti. It's just like, I'm having too much fun over here. But we can't get ahead of ourselves here. The impact of The Old Man and the Sea on the broader level was remarkable. Sermons were preached with it as their theme. The Cuban regime of dictator Fulgencio Batista, which Hemingway despised, awarded him a medal in the name of the professional marlin fisherman from Puerto Escondido at Baja Honda. Total strangers embraced him in the streets, while his Italian translator was reputed to have burst into emotional tears as he worked. Yes, the awesome things. The very, very awesome things. Success is great, and you get to enjoy it for a very short period of time. Short as in like a minute. Until you look at yourself and be like, the next thing needs to be accomplished. For Hemingway, success is great. He enjoys it for a moment. And then, everything else that comes along with it. Just as you have so many people celebrating you and telling you how great you are, you have a lot of people coming at you from a different area, from a different background as well, who do not have who do not have good intentions in mind. Traveling to Spain and Africa. So after he produces the book and things are going well, he needs a vacation and he needs to go to Africa and, get some more inspiration and try some new things and get out of his head also. And during his trip in Africa, Hemingway somehow managed to form an attachment with a young Wakamba girl. He renamed her Deba and spoke of her as his fiancée. Then, when Mary was away in Nairobi on a Christmas present buying trip, Hemingway shot a leopard and began a drunken celebration which culminated in him bringing up a group of local girls to the camp for a party during which Mary's camp bed was broken. Again, Mary remains sanguine throughout all of this. Sanguine. Hopeful. Positive. Optimistic. On January 21st, 1954, he and Mary took off aboard a chartered Cessna 180 piloted by Roy Marsh, a bush pilot who had previously taken them on local excursions. This time their flight was to be over the even wilder country found in the eastern Congo with stops in Bukavu, which boasted a good hotel. They ran into trouble almost immediately when generator problems forced Marsh to set down for repairs. On day 2, they flew over mountains that boasted volcanoes and legendary mountain moons, which were unfortunately shrouded by impenetrable clouds. Along the way of his trip, Hemingway made a bad call to accept an offer. He was to begin a flight at night on a darkened strip. The biplane crashed on takeoff, bursting into flames. While Mary and the pilot managed to smash their way out, Hemingway found his door blocked by a jagged shard of metal. Using his head and an already dislocated shoulder as battering rams, he managed to escape the worst of the fire, but not without suffering a severe concussion. News traveled slowly. People thought he had died in the crash, and this event gave him an opportunity to see what people had really thought of him. He had the unique opportunity of reading what his peers thought in his obituary, which is, could you imagine reading your own obituary accidentally in this case? Like, it'd be fascinating to see, and how lucky he was that he was able to get a glimpse of what people thought. Overwhelmingly, or the most of the judgments passed about him were for his focus on his flirtation with death. Like, he had spent a good deal of his time flirting with death and trying to find death. Quote, Hemingway would say to this, "Can one imagine that if a man found one more time, Hemingway in his own words, to quote this, can one imagine that if a man sought death all his life, he could not have found her before the age of 54? He's like, I've been seeking death all my life and I haven't been able to find it, and I'm 54. Yeah, just because you're lucky and you have, relatively good genes and you're able to withstand all of this doesn't mean that it's not true. At 18, he started out for war. We can say it's adventure, but the sports, the crazy sports he would do, the boxing, the drinking, and then the plane crashes. And again, the many wars when he's traveling to these different places, flea-infested, ridden areas, when he's on duty to cover, war-torn areas for, the magazines and the papers. He's putting himself in situations and trying to find ways to, go on the battlefield. Yes, Hemingway, you've been seeking death for the better part of your entire life. As soon as you were a man, you began seeking death. I think we can all say that from what, if we have really, seen a little bit of Hemingway. So, the crash, though, going back to the crash, the full extent of it, they really didn't understand all the severity until, Hemingway ended up in Italy, and then they would, look at everything later on. The full extent and severity of Hemingway's injuries were diagnosed. According to Mary, he had suffered 2 cracked and impacted spinal disc, ruptured to his liver, spleen, and 1 kidney, both his arm and right shoulder dislocated, and first-degree burns on his face, arms, and head. Death, whether male or female, had indeed come close, his friends being appalled by the sight of him when he returned to Cuba. What was shocking to me now was how he had aged in the intervening 5 months. one friend stated. What was there of his hair, most of it had been burned off, had turned from brittle to white, as had his beard, and he appeared to have diminished somewhat. I don't mean physically diminished, but some of the aura of massiveness seemed to have gone out of him. So that crash is beginning to take its toll. That crash is beginning to like catch up to him. And the alcohol and the drinking and the years of hard living and living as if he is a war hero, going about in all these trips. But the drinking and the lifestyle, leading that lifestyle, and the poor eating and the poor drinking, I think the drinking contributed to many more of his ailments than being an adventurous spirit and actually getting those injuries did. So you can say it's a combination of both, but either way, around 54, it all began to catch up to him. It's as if all those things slowly were just compounding and then just getting ready to blow. Oh, positive news though. If 1954 was a year that had begun badly, it was to end triumphantly with news that Ernest Miller Hemingway had finally won the Nobel Prize for literature he had coveted for so long. If he was contented with the prize himself, Hemingway was less pleased with the official citation issued by the Nobel Committee, which described him as having come through an early brutal, cynical, and callous phase to emerge with a powerful, style-making mastery of the art of modern narration. Cool. So, it would have been nice for him to be able to travel to Stockholm, but unfortunately he was unfit and he couldn't go and receive it in person. But he convinced the ambassador to Sweden, the U.S. ambassador to Sweden, he convinced him to go and accept his speech and deliver his acceptance speech on his behalf. Speech, as we go, Hemingway's speech that he would have, the U.S. ambassador to Sweden deliver, goes. Writing, at its best, is a lonely life. Organizations for writers palliate the writer's loneliness, but doubt if they improve his writing. He grows in public stature as he sheds his loneliness, and often his work deteriorates, for he does his work alone, and if he is a good enough writer, he must face eternity, or the lack of it, each day. For a true writer, each book should be a new beginning where he tries again for something that is beyond attainment. He should always try for something that has never been done, or that others have tried and failed. Then sometimes with great luck he will succeed. How simple the writing of literature would be if it were only necessary to write in another way that has been well written. It is because we have had such great writers in the past that a writer is driven far out past where he can go, out to where no one can help him. I have spoken too long for a writer. A writer should write what he has to say and not speak it. Again, I thank you. Privately, Hemingway told his friends, no son of a bitch that ever won the Nobel Prize ever wrote anything worth reading afterwards. Sadly, in his case, this was to be only too true. The accolades, the success, all of it. The aftermath of winning the Nobel Prize brought many visitors to Hemingway's beloved finca. Normally, he would have never given these types of people the time of day. However, his vanity prevailed. If a part of him was flattered by this explosion of interest and another satisfied by the praise which such visitors rained on him, the fruits of success often bore the bitter taste of sycophancy and insincerity. Then there were the busloads of rubbernecking tourists, the avid, ever-inventive fans, and the other loopies who manages to reach the front door, and the eager young writers seeking pearls of wisdom, and the pedantic academics who wanted him to help them deconstruct his work to confirm their own crazy theories. being successful. Ooh, being successful is hard sometimes. Or becoming a success, yeah. I won't say rich, I will say successful. Because a person who inherits wealth is rich, they're not successful. A person who is successful is a person who worked at something and built it from the ground up and did the hard work. Or perhaps they don't have to necessarily build from the ground up, but they build a significant amount of work or body of, anything, and then, put it out in the public. But before we move on to the final bits with Hemingway, I want you to see this video of Hemingway talking. And this is after the crash, and this is after, you know, things. He's won the Nobel Prize, and he's writing his last book that we have heard of. You probably haven't heard of, and we've never read, and probably never will. So he was right. But I'm shocked. I'm shocked to see him in such a state. But you have to remember the illnesses, the drinking, the hard living, and all the crazy stuff that he did. I'm going to play this. You're going to listen, and then we're going to reconvene and then get into more later.
Go to Sweden to receive the award?
I'm sorry that I will not be able to go to Sweden on the orders of my doctor, who says that I'm doing very well after the serious internal injuries that I received in the air crashes, and that he believes that it would be very bad for me to interrupt the regime which I have been maintaining. Go ahead.
You're working on a new novel, are you not?
I have been working on a long novel, which is in the vaults of the bank here in Havana, and I have been writing short stories, one of which seems to be, unfortunately or fortunately, grown into a novel.
That's good. Do you have a name for your new novel?
I never have any names for anything that I publish until it is time to publish it, as I select a great many names and then reject those which are worthless. Period. Most of them are worthless. Period.
Could you tell me a short description of what your new novel is about?
The book that I am writing on at present is about Africa, its people, in the part that I know them, the animals, and the changes in Africa since I was there last. Period.
Well, may I thank you very much for your cooperation and your courtesy to National Broadcasting for this interview.
Thank you very much. I am grateful to the National Broadcasting Company for coming out here to the Finca.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks very much.
Okay.
Never meet your heroes. Never meet your heroes. This is why I don't cover living people. I cover primarily people who are dead. Billy Joel is the only man who was good enough, living man, good enough to grace this podcast without having to be dead. But my heart, I'm a little bit, wow. I would have loved to see him in his heyday. I would have loved to see him when he was just in his prime, in his youth. Get a glimpse. And you can see the deterioration. You can see the difference, and you can see what has happened to him. And my heart breaks for him, but he did it to himself, and he continues to do it to himself. But his work will live on, and his brilliance and what he gave us it's priceless. Truly is priceless. But towards the end, even with all this success, having finally made it, everybody is cheering him on and accolades and all the good things. Even with all of this man would still end up leaving this world by his own hands. And let's get into a bit of tidbit of how that ended up being, or what finally got him to just choose to leave this world by his own hands. The paranoia, the numerous injuries, it all led to one road. As you saw in that clip of him, the man is a shell of himself. I'm sure if we were to compare him, a 22-year-old Hemingway versus a 54-year-old Hemingway, the man has been withered down by life. So, all the injuries and everything, all the drinking, it all led towards where we are at. Where he was at to that point where he made that decision. Hemingway had a growing concern that the FBI was after him. He, in fact, was correct to a degree. The J. Edgar Hoover suits had possessed a film marked Hemingway EM since the wild and wacky days of the Crook Factory. Some things going against him being his support of Castro in the Cuban Revolution and his return to Cuba in the spring of 1960, and the pictures of him presenting Castro with a championship cup. But Hemingway became a conspiracy theorist of the highest order. When he noticed lights burning late at night in a local bank, for instance, no amount of rational explanation, such as cleaners at work, could dissuade him from the conviction that it was FBI trying to get something on him. Towards the end, his father had paranoia, and his father's business wasn't going well, so he began having weird tendencies, and his brain, it's just things they're not really working out very well for him. But I think drinking exacerbated the problem and made Hemingway have these issues that maybe he would have gotten in old age, maybe perhaps like late 60s, early 70s. I think drinking, accelerated the process, and by 54 he's experiencing everything that he's experiencing. But his father had a history of paranoia, and his mom had a history of dementia. Initial medical records not only confirmed that Hemingway did in fact have high blood pressure and cholesterol counts, but suggested that he was suffering from a form of diabetes mellitus. I would like to say, oh boy. He was suffering from diabetes. One of the medical team also suspected that Hemingway had hemochromatosis, a congenital metabolic disorder which involves an accumulation of iron in the body system, which adversely and irreversibly affects the heart, liver, and other vital organs. At night, with all these, paranoia and things going on, he's yelling at Mary for spending too much money on groceries. The deal for the old man in the sea has gone through. He's a multimillionaire. He doesn't need to worry about money. In his youth, when he was marrying older, richer women and depending on them, he didn't worry about money. But he's made it and he has all the money in the world, and now he's worrying about money. Or even when he was on his own and he should have been worrying about money. You see the paranoia? You understand it. A multimillionaire yelling at his wife about how much money she spent on groceries. Yeah, that's a lot of paranoia. So sometimes they would end up putting him in a couple of, homes to go and get recuperated and recover, and mental asylums probably. The hospital released Hemingway after, 2 days, and he finagled and managed to fool his doctors into letting him go home. And his wife wasn't fooled, but she did her best to try to take care of him and keep him, from doing the worst of the worst, but she couldn't quite contain him like a hospital can contain him. When Hemingway was taken back in Ketchum, you know, Idaho, or the area where he can be tranquil and get away from the certain lifestyle of having fun and partying all the time, he can just go and see the mountains and chillax. When he was in Ketchum, Hemingway, had initial joy at seeing his old friends again and having fun with them. And, the Idaho summer, they're relaxing, and for the beginning, it was pretty good, He was getting along, but then soon the morose lethargy overtook him. And he sat there day after day in the corner, saying nothing to anyone who came calling. And he would have different things where he's like, hey, he would point to his wife, what's happening over there? Do you see what's happening over there? Who is that guy? And they're like, oh, he's just an agency guy. And he would be like, no, he's an FBI agent. He's out to get me. Wow. Wow. So towards the end, after he came home, he went to bed finally. Mary got him to go to sleep and sang one of his favorite songs, like a lullaby kind of. And they retired to their separate rooms. Her in the front, him in the back. And in the early morning, Mary wakes up and she hears a loud thud on the floor. And then eventually it would come out that he had chosen to leave his world by his own hands. It is said in the book that Hemingway undoubtedly came to understand towards the end exactly what his father was going through, or perhaps had a very keen understanding of what his father might have been going through, because the paranoia and the man had finally he got success. He reached everything. He made it. He has the money. He did manage to keep a woman. He has everything. Why would he leave if it wasn't so unbearable? If the paranoia and, his mentality wasn't so deteriorated that it was just easier for him to just be like, I'll see you in the next life. And as we saw in that clip, that looked like a Hemingway that was at his towards the end. It looked like a dying tiger. It looked like a shell of a formidable beast that once was. That's what it looked like. And I seen that clip and reading about him and seeing the type of man that he was and the way that he enjoyed sports and he loved having all his faculties and going out and doing all these things, I can understand. I get it. I can understand how he would come to that conclusion finally. But the mental illness is genuinely there. His dad had paranoia towards the end and went his own ways. His mom, when she, was going her own way, she had like dementia and was losing it. His alcohol, his hard living, his drinking certainly did not help with him, living a life that would, keep his mental acuteness at the sharpest level. It's crazy. It's crazy. I've been, I've had a lot of fun with you guys. I'm excited. Today I think it's finally a lot of things are coming together and we are just, getting a good thing over here. I have ideas and I'm just going to sit here for 5 minutes and I'm going to just talk with you guys and just chillax on YouTube for a moment and put some things in the chat. So if people watch, it's awesome. If not, totally cool. But let me do topic number 1. So, yeah, the chat box is now open. And if people want to come in, that's great. That's awesome. Weigh in on these topics. But the first topic, Martha, and the rude shock, the reunion, and the row that they had together. And she was fed up with him. She told him his gigantic ego, his inability to act like an adult, moving to another room in the Dorchester Hotel was at the moment. She would stay and then, consider herself free of Hemingway. Thought number one. Yeah. Thought number one. That's just crazy. But it's just the level and all of this. It's just everything that's happening. Wow. But I can only think that the drinking took over. I can only think that really truly the drinking just took over. I really do. The next part we're thinking about his fourth marriage and the cock fighting. The fighting cocks. I don't think I could do it. Mary, his last wife, had serious reservations, but she went along marrying him anyways. Anybody? That's a lot. I don't think I would have gone ahead and married a man if I had, witnessed all of that. And we've already been in there. But, put it down below. What do you think of all these crazy things? A woman hit her and her choosing to stay. That's craziness. But the pictures over here looks pretty cool. True to form. You have a couple, heads of antelopes or something it looks like over there, or, hanging near the doorway. And this is his typewriter, and him, of course, pouring a drink. I'm sure is just a lot of fun for him, because it's glory days and reminds him of different things. Mary Walsh had serious reservations, but she still married him. I think she's just crazy. I just truly think she's crazy. There are crazy men and there are also crazy women. And all the body of work, everything that Hemingway wrote. It's funny how men live, he lived his life. The entire, the separate from God, and how Hemingway lived his life, and just people taking his work and then putting in their own little tidbits of what they think is funny. It's funny because the man couldn't have been any more different than a Christian, or living a Christian lifestyle. The way that he is, in terms of the drinking, the many wives, the, cheating, couldn't have been, more a depiction of a person who is not Christian. But it's super duper funny how sermons began to be told based on, his book, and people reading into it and taking the, 3 days suffering and 3 nights suffering as similar to Christ. 3 days suffering on the cross, and the 3rd day he rose again. That's ironic. It truly is ironic how some of these things turn out. I have had a lot of fun with Hemingway. I've enjoyed this one. And, I always have a lot of fun enjoying these topics with you guys. And I'm excited for the next one. Of course, we're going to get into Nikola Tesla. Get into Nikola Tesla and see all the pretty cool things with him as well. So, it's been great. Thursday is awesome. So, au revoir. À demain. À semaine prochaine. And I will see you next time.